It's been ages since Maruti Suzuki discontinued the Gypsy. I remember how as a kid I used to adore that car, still do. But you see, with the big influx of soft-roaders which have plenty of creature comforts, the Gypsy didn't really find many takers in the last couple of decades. But now people are bitten by the adventure bug. Everyone seems to be lapping the Mahindra Thar as if they were prepping for a gold rush. So you see, there is now space for a focused off-roader, and which is why the spiritual successor to the Gypsy is now back. It has been ages since Maruti Suzuki has been making it and exporting it out of India, and we've never got a chance to drive it. Finally, today is the day when the new Jimny is out here on the Indian roads and we are driving it. Take a look. The words India-spec are important with this car because this is the 5-door Jimny. You see, India is largely a market of single car garages, which means that the 2-door Jimny wouldn't have probably worked. I know a lot of you Thar owners out there will disagree, but then the 2-door Jimny is so compact, it just wouldn't make much sense for the Indian audience if that was going to be the only car in the garage. That would have made it a very niche offering. This one will certainly find more takers. The 5-door configuration gives it a 340mm longer wheelbase than the 3-door and a lot more boot space too. The boot space seems pretty shallow on paper, but honestly it's not too bad because you get this large squarish opening, which means that you can put 2 large suitcases. That shouldn't be a problem at all. And the loading lip isn't too high either. So overall, the ergonomics or the space of the boot, not something that I'll complain about. And should you need more space, you can always drop these 50-50 split seats. Now, speaking of the seats, the rear door, it's not too wide. You can see that it's not too wide. However, because of the height of the car, ingress and egress isn't that big a problem. It doesn't feel as tight as a hatchback. Should you drop the rear seats to maximize cargo space, you'll have to be mindful of the large locking brackets, which by the way also allow the rear seats around 4 degrees of additional recline. The width of the cabin, however, is comparable to a Swift. So while you do get that recline, the cushioning is pretty flat. You get good lumbar support, but under thigh support could have been better. The seats could have been a little longer and there could have been a slightly more upright squab over here to give you better under thigh support, but unfortunately you do not get that. Also, because of the 50-50 split, you do not get a smaller center seat to keep a kid in. This place is only good enough for 2 adults. You also get 2 adjustable headrests and only 2 seat belts. So strictly 2 adults only. You do get ISOFIX child seat mounts though, so you can place a child seat over here comfortably. That shouldn't be a problem at all. Speaking of comfort, well, this is the kind of knee room I get when I put the front seat, the driver's seat, to my preference. And it's honestly not too bad. And even though the right rail and the left rail for the seats is at 2 different levels, the foot space is still quite good. Even the headroom, they've scooped it out a little bit, the headliner, so you get decent headroom as well. Visibility outside of the window is also quite good. However, the headrests at the front are quite large, the seats are nice and broad, so they make it quite comfortable for the front passengers, but at the same time, the air conditioning, the overall air circulation is not up to the mark. I think when they extended the wheelbase, when they made this 4-door or a 5-door configuration, they should have also added rear AC vents. That I think is a missed opportunity. They definitely should have done that. You also do not get any center armrest because of the 50-50 split, and even to get some space for your knickknacks, you have to resort to only these pockets. So while the Indian 5-door variant offers better space, the Jimny's cabin remains more functional and straightforward than outright comfortable. But the driver's seat should have been height adjustable. The dashboard, scratchy plastics, but I do like this rubberized big grab handle. Unfortunately, nothing like that for the driver. I'm going to come to that later. The dashboard layout, it looks quite nice with the whole grid layout. Some may not like it though, but I quite like it. It's very functional. I love those old school dials. It's got a very Japanese old school off-roader vibe. So I quite like it. The dashboard could have done with a bit more color. but I'm sure a lot of you might want to look at aftermarket options like wraps or maybe some inserts here and there, maybe some different bezels for the AC vents, etc. You'll also have to look at aftermarket options for some storage, because as you can see, there's hardly any storage. Even a plus size phone doesn't find any space anywhere. Should you choose the automatic, there is some space out here, but with the manual, there's nothing, because this tunnel console has these two levers, so there's absolutely no space here. You don't even get too many cup holders, you only get 2 cup holders here. There's nothing in the doors, there's no cool cup holder like some of the smaller Maruti Suzuki hatchbacks, etc. So yeah, in terms of the storage, in terms of utility spaces, not too much. Ergonomics are pretty decent, but this is clearly more function over form. While Maruti Suzuki couldn't confirm this, it looks like you should be able to hose down the cabin to clean all the muck and dirt. The chunky controls look good and their tactile feedback feels good too. The infotainment system isn't too basic. You get 2 touchscreen options with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, and the top-end system gets connected technologies, voice commands and Archaime's tuned surround sound like some of the other Nexa cars. The audio quality honestly is pretty average. With those very slim door pads, there's a lot of reverbing that happens from those plastics, and that's the reason why the audio quality or the audio experience is not really the Archaime's level. So don't go by that brochure talk. The audio quality is just plain average. To add to it, the cabin fills up with all kinds of noises on the move. The engine note, transmission whines, road and wind noises, etc. Some of you will like that feeling, some of you may not. The sound insulation then is pretty average too. Further, the body shape punches a square hole through the air, which means that the aerodynamics don't aid the noise insulation or the efficiency. The body uses Suzuki's tech platform for its lightweight construction. The slim doors, vertical pillars, straight lines make the Jimny the boxiest SUV in its category. It doesn't look as imposing as the Thar or even the Gurkha for that matter, but it doesn't lack character either. It looks like the emoji of a G-Wagon or a Defender, and that's a big draw for the Jimny. Can it rule all terrains like these stalwarts though? So let us start off with what the Jimny is known for, but what most of its customers will not do, and that's going off-roading. And I'm not talking about pulling stunts like these. This car can do a lot more than that. We have this entire region to go check that out. So let me show you. And oh, please don't mind these clothes. I don't mind getting them dirty, because that's what the car's going to do now. The terrain you see here is full of pebbled rocks from the dry riverbed, soft sand and slush, all of which challenge traction. While the test courses included some steep ascents and descents, some axle twisting drops and plenty of river crossings too. Now you have seen vehicles tripoding, but letting 2 wheels on flat ground and dropping the other side down at a steep angle sure sounds and looks scary. But the Jimny handles that efficiently with its slim tires tiptoeing through the obstacles. Just check out those angles on the rear wheel and that front wheel. The suspension setup is beautiful. It's also got a multi-point linkage system. It's got a rigid front and rear axle as well. And that is what contributes towards making this vehicle so good off the road. We approached a 70-degree steep descent turning in, and the breakover angle, even for this longer 5-door Jimny, did not feel inadequate. And the fact that you can see both corners of the clamshell bonnet is a big plus. There's a hill descent control which limits the speed to 5 km an hour, which is perfect for tricky, rocky downhills. The wading depth isn't on par with some of the competition, but if you want to tread deeper waters, Suzuki will sell you a snorkel that replaces this panel, which by the way was inspired by the Gypsy. So we've done multiple courses today. Usually most car makers will organize courses which are tailor-made for vehicles. Here, it's all natural. It's the natural habitat. Yes, certain things have been sort of made, but that's to add the extremities to it, to make it more difficult. And you saw with the kind of ease that this car goes through all of it. And that's really the beauty of it. Because if you look at the spec sheet, Of course, there'll be a lot of areas where you may think, no, it's probably not up to the mark, it's not as powerful, it's not as torquey, the breakover angle or maybe the front approach angle, it may not be, up there with the competition. 210 millimeters of ground clearance may not be enough. The tires are too skinny. Believe me, just take all of that, throw it out of the window, because the car is surprisingly good at all of this stuff. It feels very easy. That's the more important bit. It feels very friendly. It feels very unintimidating. It feels very confidence inspiring, no matter what you're doing with it. Just wading through water or going down those steep descents. It's just so effortless, and that's the key word here, effortless. The mere 1.2-ton weight of the Jimny helps it trot over such terrain without bogging down, while the linear power delivery of the naturally aspirated engine ensures superb tractability. While off-road, the Jimny is proof that lots of power and torque aren't necessarily a good thing. Astonishingly, we could do most of the drills that you see here with the stock highway tires and in two-wheel drive mode, and it's only on the extremely steep or slippery stuff where four-wheel drive or even four-low had to be summoned. What's also impressive is that most of these drills were done with the 4-speed automatic, so no matter which transmission you choose, going off the beaten path and even to some extreme trails will feel like a breeze in the Jimny. From an off-roading perspective, yes, I would have liked a few things to be a little different or better. For example, there are no grab handles for the driver anywhere, especially at those extreme angles. You feel that there should have been something. The steering is the only thing that you can hold on to, and maybe sometimes hold on to your dear life, because that is what it looks like. The steering wheel also comes from other Maruti Suzuki cars. It should have been a more off-road focused wheel with more pronounced grooves to latch onto when driving on loose surface that makes the steering go berserk. Apart from that, I would have also liked an adjustability for the height of the seat belt. Especially when going side to side, this thing just digs into your neck. It's too high for my liking. It should have been more adjustable, and that is something that's sorely missed on this. Otherwise, what I really like from this off-roading perspective is the kind of perspective that you get outside of the window, outside of the windscreen. The kind of visibility that it offers you is excellent. You always see the two corners of the bonnet, and that gives you a very clear judgment of where the front end of the car is. And despite this being a 5-door, despite this being a long wheelbase, you can easily get a judgment of where the rear end of the car is. Speaking of visibility, the chunky mirrors offer good visibility too, but don't get cameras. So no 360-degree camera aid for the Jimny, which is sorely missed. There is a reversing camera, which is mounted at a very awkward angle on the spare wheel. It has no dynamic guidelines, and the feed reminds me of the VHS tape era. I hope there is an upgrade available for that. So that boxy shape that we are talking about, the dimensions of the car, the proportions of the car, the geometry of each and everything in the car is actually quite good. Now let's see how it is back on the road. So you can probably hear the beeper, and that beeper, well, it's for the rear seat belts. There's no one sitting in the rear seat, and we still have that beeper. And that's because the seat belts aren't locked in place. There's something that we showed you with the Fronx, and it's the same problem here with the Jimny as well. Even if no one's sitting in the back seat, you have to lock the seat belts for the beeper to go off. Otherwise, you have to keep driving with that for a few minutes, and then it eventually goes off after getting a little louder. The Jimny is powered by the familiar 1.5-litre 4-cylinder naturally aspirated petrol engine, but it is longitudinally mounted in the Jimny and runs a rear-wheel drive setup when in two-wheel drive mode. It is certainly more refined than its rivals, but feels gruff compared to its transversely mounted applications like the Brezza or the Ertiga, for example. It doesn't feel as punchy either. Being in Dehradun, we are subject to some really narrow roads and some uphill climbs as well. And here, that low torque output is making itself evident. It wasn't a big problem off the road, but here it is making itself evident. I'm having to be in second gear most of the times, or sometimes even having to come down to the first gear, and that's with just me and my camera person right now in the car. So it's a bit of a downer. This is where probably turbocharging would have helped. This is where probably more power, more torque would have helped. At the same time, that would have become a big problem off the road, and this is primarily an off-roader, and that is why you have to live with the kind of power and torque output it gives you. The meat of the power lies between the 2 to 4000 RPM mark. Beyond this point, the power tapers off and the car struggles to get anywhere close to the 6000 RPM red line. Sure, the Jimny isn't the kind of car that you will race to the red line with, but pulling overtakes needs a lot of planning, especially at highway speeds, as you are left wanting for that power boost. The smart hybrid tech probably could have helped not just with the power delivery but also with the fuel economy. The 4-speed torque converter, as before, is slow to respond on the tarmac, but shifting to the L or second helps plan those overtakes better. As far as the manual transmission goes, we've sampled it in the past. The 5-speed, it does feel a bit notchy. The gear shifts, they do feel a bit notchy. Here in this car, the throws are quite long as well. But I quite like that feeling. I'm not really complaining about that notchy feeling. It feels mechanical, it feels better connected, and I like that feeling. Even the clutch pedal feels nice and light. So even when driving through city traffic or on winding roads like these, it doesn't feel cumbersome at all. Engaging the reverse gear or the 4-low can take a bit of effort at times. The forward gears or switching between 2-wheel to 4-wheel high isn't as cumbersome. The Jimny also runs different gear ratios than the more road-focused applications of the 1.5-litre engine, like the Brezza and Ertiga again. We were also able to get a quick fuel economy test done, and it affirmed that the Jimny does guzzle quite a bit, though it's not as thirsty as the petrol Thar. Expect a further 10% economy drop on the automatic. Even the steering of the Jimny needs getting used to because it uses the slower ball screw type steering gear instead of a rack and pinion type steering used on the other Maruti Suzuki cars. It's not the typical electric power steering that you get with most of the new Maruti Suzuki cars. So it doesn't have that overly light feeling to begin with. It does feel a little heavy. I quite like it. But it's also a little slow to respond to. It's something that you need to come to terms with, you need to get used to. This is an off-roader after all. It gives you very good feedback when you're off the road, but here around winding roads, the responses from the steering are a bit delayed, are a bit slow, and that is something that you need to factor in. The ride quality is exceptionally good, and potholes or tall speed breakers don't worry the Jimny much. So while the ride will never really get bone-jarring, the body-on-frame construction means that there is plenty of vertical movement or side-to-side movement over undulations or poor roads. But this car is also more enduring to such harsh conditions than any other Maruti Suzuki product right now. As you'd expect, the Jimny is not a cornering tool. Taking corners at slow speeds, maybe 40-50, not a problem at all. Despite its tall ride height and its slim tires and everything, you should be able to make the curve very easily without it feeling unnerving. But the moment the speeds rise, that is where the body roll, the vertical movement, it all starts making itself quite evident, and then things can get a bit hairy. The grip from those slim tires is not too bad, honestly. It's quite good for these HT tires. But at the same time, because of the body roll, there is a bit of that understeery nature that will be exposed, and that is what makes things a bit unnerving. Keep the speeds in check around the twisties and you should be just fine. Lane changes at triple-digit speeds is not a big deal at all. There you don't feel that body roll all that much. It's only around the winding roads where you have that much vertical movement, but on the straight roads while changing lanes, not too bad. The highway stability of the Jimny is not too bad. Speeds of about 100 kilometers an hour, not too bad at all. It doesn't feel unnerving driving at this speed, even braking at this speed, not a problem at all. But yes, the brakes do have a bit of a spongy feel to them. They don't feel as bitey, and that's expected on an off-road vehicle like this. The brake modulation is pretty easy because of that, and that's a very good feeling. But yes, you again, like the steering, even the brakes feel a little slow, so you have to factor that in if you're going to be driving at triple-digit speeds. So the brakes can sometimes need a firm push of the pedal. On the highway, the Jimny's happy zone is between 100 to 130 km an hour, beyond which the cabin becomes noisy and the brakes feel unnerving because of the pronounced dive from the soft suspension. So it's a decent highway cruiser if you stick to the Indian speed limits, but if you seek speed and power, the Jimny isn't designed for it. Summing this up is pretty simple. If you're looking for creature comforts, if you're looking for a comfortable ride, if you're looking for an urban cruiser of sorts, you're better off with something like the Brezza, not the Jimny. But if you are willing to accept this as an off-roader first, which it is, and then willing to start looking at the niceties that it offers even on the road, then you might see plenty of value in what the Jimny offers. Think of it as something like the Hero X-Pulse, if you've ridden it, with the kind of electronics that a KTM 390 Adventure offers for that matter. That essentially means that what you're getting is a very comfortable, easygoing, friendly off-roader, but with all the necessary essentials that you want in 2023. And that, if you look at it that way, then this package makes a lot of sense. Let me know, what do you think? Like adventure vehicles of all kinds, the Jimny also enjoys big aftermarket support that can enhance the car's appearance, comforts, capabilities and scope. Internationally, it enjoys a big community and brotherhood like the Jeepers, and if priced right, it's likely to do the same in India as well. Most of you often say what's being marketed as SUVs aren't really SUVs, they're crossovers. Well, here's one car that's a true blue SUV then. Old-timers, the gypsy communities, and people like me maybe wanting to own a gypsy at some point will find a modern mountain goat in the Jimny. So while it may not be the right car for a single car garage, it's a must-have in your garage if the adventure bug has bitten you.